Hi, I'm Steve Hilby, pastor of the At Home Church. If you've not seen any of our videos before, we have a house church that we have which means we meet in people's homes. These are videos right now that we're doing on the next steps. The next steps for people who've just become a Christian, or even for people who have been a Christian for a while, but have kind of lost sight of what it means to be a Christian and really aren't following very much in the way. Kind of a refresher course for them. Today we're talking about obedience, and we're actually going to do this. Is going to be a two-parter. So today we're going to talk about obedience concerning the Ten Commandments, and then next week we're going to be talking about obedience concerning your life's work and what you want to be doing and what God would have you do besides the Ten Commandments. So in this one, I'd like to start off by telling about what happened in Spokane. About 45 years ago, I was an associate pastor in a church, large church in Spokane, Washington. And I was asked to go into one of the Sunday school classes one day and talk to them about how do you reach somebody for God? How do you tell them the gospel story and get them to make a commitment to it? And so I began to share how I would do that, one of the ways I would do it. And when I got through explaining about how they need to ask Christ into their life, I then said that once they've made that decision, then they need to begin to obey God. And instantly, the people in the room, all of them, including the teacher, they raised their eyes, their mouths went up, and they all went like this. And the teacher immediately stopped me and said, "No, you can't say that. You can't say that to a new Christian. Why? What if that turns them off? You need to go easy and ease them into obeying God." And the rest of the class agreed with that. It's interesting because pretty much everybody in that class, including the teacher, they were fairly young, but each of them had been a part of the church literally since they were born. They had not known anything except the church, and that was their attitude, is that we're worried that if we tell people that they have to obey God, well, then they're going to run for the hills. Well, I have a different attitude. I believe if you're going to sign on the dotted line and accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior and begin to live for Him, you need to know what that entails. Because becoming a Christian is the easy part. It's what happens afterwards when God says, now you need to actually follow me. You need to obey me. You need to be a part of my family. And we're going to start here with the Ten Commandments. And let's start off with the fact that people often look at those and say, oh, no, not those. All those don'ts. The don'ts in the Bible. All the things you cannot do. The Bible's full of them. That's not necessarily true. Let's understand that what is not prohibited is permitted. Let me say that again. What is not prohibited is permitted. It's not about the thou shall nots. In fact, I look at it as all the thou shalls. One of the things that when I first became a Christian as a teenager, I remember being told by several in the church that now I can no longer listen to rock and roll. Well, I didn't get that, and I still listen to the old 60s and 70s stuff. That's just who I am. I'm old school, and I love to enjoy it, along with a lot of other kinds of music, jazz and classical and R&B and a number of other things. But the reality is God's never told me, either in the scripture or personally, that I'm to stop listening to rock and roll. I was told that I couldn't go to dances anymore. Well, I still went to those dances, and I still have not found anywhere in the scripture where it tells me I can't do that. I was told that I could have sex when I got married, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But at the same time, I was never to enjoy it. Thou shalt not enjoy it. And there's a whole lot of the thou shalt nots. Well, those aren't in the Ten Commandments. For the most part, those are not in the Bible at all. And the reality is each of those things is permitted because they are not prohibited. Don't get caught up in the idea of somebody telling you, thou shalt not enjoy life. Thou shalt not have fun. Thou shalt not pick your nose. Well, you shouldn't do that anyway, but that's not the point. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you can't do it. It just doesn't look good. So let's get into those 10 commandments, and let's start with the first four, because the first four are the foundation for our life with God. I consider those to be what I call a vertical relationship, the relationship between me and God. And the first one is very simple. You will have no other gods besides me. By the way, if you're looking at a reference for this, you want to look in Exodus chapter 20. You'll find all 10 commandments listed one after the other in there. So Exodus chapter 20 is the book right after the book of Genesis, so the second book in the Old Testament in the Bible. But it starts off there, you shall have no other gods beside me. Part of the reason that I have problems with people who have addictions is because addiction is what? It's another god. People want to say, well, I don't have any other gods. I don't follow the Muslim God. I don't follow the idea of the Buddhists. I don't follow the belief of the Hindus or the Sikhs or whatever else. But it's more than just that. No other gods means I'm not going to follow those gods that want to control my life. That's what a god basically does. Control. We obey whatever God is there. That's the problem with addictions. Addiction to pornography, addiction to drugs, addiction to alcohol. You name the whatever it is, I'm going to tell you that is a God that you're following. Now that goes right along with the second commandment here, which is make no idols. And in a sense, when we follow other gods, we make other idols. I knew two guys, actually, that made sports into their idols. One of them had 12 to 15 TVs spread around the perimeter of his living room. And he sat in a chair, one of those office chairs with wheels on it, and he had all these remotes that he went. This is before the day of universal remotes. And he would sit there with each remote. He had TV trays stationed around with the remotes around so he could turn around, and he would watch. And on three of them, he might be watching football games in September, while at the same time watching 3 or 4 different baseball games. And he'd watch beach volleyball at the same time, and he'd watch he'd be watching. One time I watched him. He missed all these other games. He's watching. One station was turned to a ping pong match. I mean, you name the sport, he had to watch it. Bowling. I'm sorry, I love bowling, but I'm not going to watch it on TV. That's kind of like watching paint dry. The second guy that was addicted to sports was addicted to watching them, Sports Channel. He would watch Sports Center 3 times. Now you have to understand, the first time it's live. The second and third time it's the same thing you watched the first time. So he said he would get up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to watch it over again because he had to get every nuance of it because it was so important for his life. Eventually, he was a pastor. Eventually, his addiction to sports as an idol took over his life so much that he had no choice but to leave the ministry. And it was sad because he was a very effective pastor and a great preacher. The idea becomes we don't want now some people are going to say, well, that means you're against sports. No, actually, if you know me well, you know that I love sports. I've played baseball or softball all my life. I've coached Little League and other youth sport teams. I love to watch the Warriors on TV. I love to go to a game. I enjoy it. But it's not more important than God. God is more important. Anything that we make more important than God, God says no. You need to somehow take that out of your life. I told you before that I enjoy rock and roll, especially the 60s and 70s stuff. That's just what I really love. But if that became more important to me than God, or sometimes people make their families more important than God, or their work, or I actually knew one guy that his looks were so important. He didn't want good looks were everything to him. He didn't want to even be around anybody that he didn't consider to be one of the beautiful people. He had made them into his idols, his good looks and theirs. There's a lot of things that we make, money, our home, a whole number of things. We can go on in that. The third commandment here is do not take God's name in vain. Now, I have no choice but to kind of do that to demonstrate, but think about it. When we sit there and say, oh my God, what are we doing? We are in essence making God into a horrible thing. We're taking God's name and we're putting people down using him. We're putting the system down using him. It would be just like my son-in-law. His name is Jeff, and it'd be just like if you and I, instead of saying "Oh my God," we would, every time we're disgusted with something or every time we're unhappy, would say, "Oh my Jeffrey." I mean, after a while, Jeff would be going, "You don't like me? You hate me or something? I mean, why are you using my name?" So God's just simply saying, look, be respectful towards me, just as I am respectful towards you. God doesn't put us down. God doesn't tear us apart. God demonstrates his love for us. Just as my wife and my daughter both say I must express my love to my son-in-law. Okay. And I'll try to do better. But that's the whole point, is we don't want to take God's name in vain. Why? Because we want to honor and respect him. And the last of the four is we are to keep the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Now, a lot of people get caught up on this idea of, oh, the Sabbath day is on Sunday all day long, and we can't do anything on Sunday. Or some people, the Jews, for instance, Seventh-day Adventists will tell you, well, it's on Saturday. It doesn't really matter what day it is. The idea is that we take one day and we make it a day for God and for rest. Notice the beauty of what God is saying here. God doesn't just say, look, you're supposed to worship all day. You know, it's a 24-hour worship fest. Sing and pray and go to church all day. That's not what it says. Much of what that verse talks about is how we are to take it as a day of rest. And the reality is, you watch guys that work 7 days a week. After a while, they fall apart. They can't do it anymore. They have no balance in their life. After a while, the exhaustion gets to them. They start making mistakes. They're not happy anymore in life. There's no more joy. So God's very bright and incredible. After all, the God who makes us, who creates us, understands that we need to worship. And we also need a time of rest. So think about those first four. That's a vertical relationship between us and God. We are to have no other gods. We're to make no idols. We are to not take his name in vain. In other words, we're supposed to be respectful to him. And we are supposed to have a period of both rest and of worship. How hard is that? To say, oh man, that's tough to have those four things, is it? Well, let's go on to the next six, because these are the real toughies. And the six are what I consider to be a horizontal relationship with God. The one is God and I together, love and compassion and worship and respect for God and God to me. And because God gives that to me, he expects me to do the exact same to the people out there. And those next six are all about that. And the first one says that we are to honor our parents. Now, that doesn't mean, some people want to say, well, that means that I'm supposed to do everything my parents says. There's a guy who used to be really famous back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He had this program, and he used to go to churches and seminars and whatnot, and he would always talk about how you're to do everything your parents tell you, no matter what age you are, until the day they die. Even to the point of, even if you're 30 years old and you want to get married to somebody, you can't get married until they approve of that person. And if they say you're never going to get married, well, then you can never get married. That's not what honor your parents means. See, again, that takes it to an illogical conclusion. The idea of honoring your parents is that, first of all, you don't give them a bad time, and you take care of them. Taking care of them means that in their old age, you're always there for them because they were there for you. And even if they weren't there for you, it means that we have compassion and mercy upon them, and we are there for them. Because that's what part of the God's design for us. To have compassion and mercy on people, to take care of those who need it. So when our parents, now I have 3 children, 8 grandchildren as of this recording, and plus 3 in-laws, a son-in-law and 2 daughter-in-laws. And if any of you are watching, yes, you got to take care of me. No, I'm fine, at least for now. But there may be a day when I'm going to need that. Honor your parents means that when I'm in need, just as I took care of you guys when you were in need, you don't just abandon me, but rather you're there for me, and we're there for each other. The second one is no murder. Now, how hard can that be? Well, let me go a step further, because murder can mean more than just killing somebody physically. It also means killing somebody verbally, spiritually, gossip. I think gossip is one of the worst murdering weapons you can ever have. Don't harm somebody. Don't kill them. Don't hurt them. Don't harm them. Be nice to them. How hard can that be? And somebody's going to say, "Well, I hate everybody." That's obviously hard. Then you need a new attitude. The attitude that God gives, that of love and mercy. Brings us to the second one, which is no adultery. Now, I've had people, when I talk to them about that, go, "Okay, now you're really meddling." Okay, look, folks. You know, God, what does adultery do? It harms everybody involved. Everybody, psychologically, physically, spiritually. It does nothing but harm. God's basically letting us know that, look, I gave you a spouse. Honor them, love them, respect them. Don't go after somebody else's. Don't go after the idea of the grass is always greener on the other side. There's an old Far Side cartoon that I really enjoy where there's a fence down the middle of a field, and there's slats in the fence, obviously, and there's one cow with his head over on the other side of the fence, eating the grass. And next to him is a cow on the other side of the fence with his head through, eating the grass over there. Because, of course, we all know that the grass is always greener on the other side. The woman or the man is always greener, better, more perfect, more on the other side. Are they? Because after a while, we begin to realize that all people are human. Nobody is perfect. And whoever we end up with is going to be just as flawed as the people we're with. Don't commit adultery means do no harm to your neighbor. Do no harm to their wife or to their spouse. I have a friend who was talking to me one day about the time he committed adultery. And he said, "But you know what? I deserved to do it." And I go, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, you have to understand, my wife committed adultery with her husband. So it was payback." And I asked him, "How did it feel?" And he said, "Physically great. And let's not talk about it." Of course, he feels guilty to this day. Don't commit adultery. Don't do harm to somebody else. No stealing. Oh, there it is, number 4. Do not steal. Well, don't steal. Don't steal people's stuff. It's that simple. Your stuff is your stuff. Their stuff is their stuff. How hard can that be? We are not to steal. No false testimony is number 5. Do not give false witness. Now, there are 2 aspects to that. One is don't make up lies about somebody. The other one is, even if it's true, don't gossip. We've already talked about gossip on the murder part, but it still goes true to this one. Don't give a false testimony. Don't gossip about them. Don't say false things about them. Because again, you're killing the spirit. You're doing something wicked to them. Don't do that. And then sixth and last, it says, do not covet. Don't covet your neighbor's cow. Well, a lot of you don't have cows. So let me put it to 21st century language. Don't covet their Jaguar. All right? Don't sit there and go, I got to have that Lamborghini. Two things. Number one, because it'll make you feel worthless. It makes you feel like you are not as good as them. It takes you down in stature, and then it begins to make you have these expectations on yourself that simply are not good and that you can never attain, and really it kills your own spirit. You may not be hurting your neighbor because they don't know that you're going, ooh, I need that Lamborghini, baby. But the reality is you're hurting yourself. See, God understands that about us. Because then we have to do whatever it takes to get that. And then as a result of that, we are robbed of joy. We have no joy, and we have no peace in our lives. And therefore we have no hope. So we need to not covet those things. So really, these 6 rules, these horizontal, are not just between me and my neighbor, but between me and myself. As God comes to me and says, look, these are good not just for them, but for you as well. Well, there's a basic sense of justice and humanitarianism in these 6 rules. It's not that hard to keep when you begin to realize that God is a God of love, a God of compassion, a God of mercy, a God who loves you, who loves your neighbor. And when we understand that, it's easier to go ahead and follow them. I'd like to talk about 2 more scriptures just for a moment, please, and then I'll wind this up. Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, the greatest commandment is this, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Now that's the first 4 commandments right there. No other gods, make no idols, don't use his name in vain, rest in worship. There it is. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. He said the second is like that. The second is very similar. Love others as you love yourself. There it is. Love others as you love yourself. In other words, do no harm to them. Be merciful to them. Be compassionate. Honor your parents. Don't kill anybody. Don't do adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness against them. In Micah chapter 6, verses 6 through 8 in the Old Testament, prophet says, what does God require of you? But to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. There it is. Do justice, love mercy. Those are the 2, those 2 goes with those second 6. Our relationship with man, because God loves us and loves them, and to walk humbly with our God. And when we remember those things, then it becomes easier to follow the commandments that God has given. Remember, whatever is not prohibited is permitted. And after you realize that, there's a whole lot of joy in life to live. Thank you. Until next time, you have a good day and may God bless you.